All right, today's program is titled 7th Street Challenge, Lincoln's Commute, and it is part of the Presidential Primary Sources Program. And the Presidential Primary Sources Program is a partnership between Internet 2, the National Archives, and the National Park Service, and it's a free interactive educational program we put on from January through April. And this is just a reminder that by participating in this webinar, you're agreeing to be archived, recorded, broadcasted, and streamed for purposes of documenting our programs. And we put all of our programs on our YouTube page. So if you would like to go back and find old ones or see new ones as they're put on the YouTube page, feel free to do so. And we are so excited to have you all here today, and we want you to participate as much as possible. So the main way we're going to participate is through the chat box. Looks like a little message bubble at the bottom of your screen. And when we're using the chat box, we want to make sure that everything we put in there is relevant to the program and to questions that are being asked. We can also rename you if you would like to be renamed. We encourage you to rename yourself as something you'd like to be called. And if you need help with that, you can put that in the chat and we can help rename you as well. And then also, if you would like to be put on video, you can put that in the chat as well, and we can promote you to a panelist so you can see us and we can see you. That's always fun. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. And this is our website if you'd like to find out more information about the program or register for future programs. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to wonderful Joan, who's here to present with us today.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to say good morning because it's still morning here in Washington, D.C. I know you may be tuning in from other places. My name's Joan, and I work here at President Lincoln's Cottage. We are a museum, a historic house in Washington, D.C., where Lincoln spent 3 summers while he was the president, and he came up with the Emancipation Proclamation while he was living here. I would love to know, as we're getting started, what are some things you all already know about Abraham Lincoln? You can tell me with your voice or drop it in the chat if you prefer. Anything you already know about Lincoln. Okay, yes, I'm seeing some good stuff coming in. He was the president during the Civil War, 16th president overall, was working on ending slavery, which was the big conflict at the heart of the Civil War. And Delvin says that he was assassinated. Right, he was killed. Delvin, do you know why he was assassinated? Can you drop that in the chat if you have an idea about that? Hello, Edgewood, it's exciting to see you. Yeah, I'm happy to remind you. So Lincoln was assassinated because of the work he had been doing to end slavery, and because he was proposing that maybe Black soldiers should be allowed to vote. And his assassin thought that that was a terrible thing to happen and made a plan to kill the president and take out the government in that way. So today, we're going to be learning about President Lincoln's commute from here at the Cottage to the White House and back. So does anybody know the word commute already? Yes, I see a hand in the back at Edgewood. What is a commute?
The commute is basically like transportation or the way you get to somewhere.
Yeah, and it's a trip that you do over and over and over again, right? Ali Wag has said going to work. So like if you guys ride the bus to school or get driven to soccer practice or anything like that, that's your commute. Lincoln was living here at the Cottage, but he was the president, so he still had to go to work at the White House. And we're going to be tracking his commute home from the White House, encountering some people he met along the way, and I'm going to have some challenges for y'all throughout. So at each stop on the commute, I will be telling you a little bit about the historical people, and then I will ask you to find something in the space you are currently in that is related to that historical information. So if, just as an example, if I asked you right now to find something that was red, could you find something nearby that was red that you would be prepared to share? Great. Ali Wag's on board. Somebody at Edgewood is wearing a big red sweatshirt there in the middle. Excellent. So that you get the idea, right? We're looking for things in the environment around you, and I want to hear what they are and sort of like where you got them and all that kind of stuff. So let me get my map organized here. This is a map of Washington, D.C., how it looked during the Civil War from above. You can see the star here is where the White House is located, and the house shape is where the Cottage is. So that's about how far the Cottage is from the White House. And you can also see that Washington, D.C. was pretty different in the 1860s from how it is today. I don't know if you can see this big loop of the river here, but many of the things you'd be familiar with in D.C., including the Lincoln Memorial, are on land that didn't exist in the 1860s. It was all just sort of a muddy, big part of the river. Lincoln would be starting his commute home at the White House. The White House looked like this in the 1860s. It looks mostly the same today. It's a little bit bigger, and it's definitely harder to get to. You can see that there's, especially in the smaller picture over on the left, there's a lot of people like all right up in front of the White House, which is really different from our expectations of access to the president. Today, it's very difficult to get inside the White House, much less meet the president. But when Lincoln was alive, the White House was open to the public. So anybody who had a question for the president or wanted a government job could go there and line up and ask. You can kind of see those people approaching in that picture, which is part of why it was really busy at the White House and part of why Lincoln needed to come to the Cottage sometimes. In addition, DC was getting more and more crowded because of the war. So when the Civil War started, DC didn't have so many people, so many buildings. And then over the course of the war, soldiers came to the city, people who were supporting the soldiers came to the city, nurses, bureaucrats, people who, sell food for soldiers. It all got a lot more crowded very quickly. And it was kind of a mess. This is a picture that was taken from the top of the Capitol building, looking west. Here you can see the Washington Monument. I also often hear students talk about it as the big pencil, if that's something you recognize. This building here is the Smithsonian Castle, which is also still there, but that's almost it that's still there from the 1860s in DC. Can you guys see this big silver stripe along the side of the screen? Yeah. That is a canal, which is a body of water that ran directly in front of the White House through the middle of the mall. So the White House is off here to the right-hand side of this image. And the canal hadn't been finished yet, so the water wasn't moving, which meant that the water was just sort of sitting there getting grosser and grosser and grosser all the time. In addition, here in Washington, D.C., it's very hot in the summer. It's humid, it's sticky, so like the air was kind of wet, and none of the streets were paved in the city, so everything was covered in mud as well. This is another view of the canal. You can see the muddy streets in this picture as well, and you can also see the Capitol building, which was not yet finished being built. So you can kind of get a sense that it was stinky, muddy, wet downtown. It was a little bit messy. And then also Lincoln had this big messy problem to work on that you all were mentioning earlier, which is like, what do we do about slavery? So inspired by this environment downtown in Washington, D.C. during the Civil War, here comes your first challenge. I am going to give you 60 seconds to come back to me with something that is wet. Ready? Go. This is great. I see Edgewood returning. I see a couple things coming in the chat. If you are joining us just through the chat, please write in what you have discovered so we can talk about it. That would be very helpful. You still have about 20 seconds to search for something that is wet in the environment nearby. I see Clorox wipes coming in. I see a shirt. Sage, you have to tell us how your shirt got wet. Normally shirts aren't wet, I think, right? hand cream, there's some mud. Croc, do you actually have mud near you? Because that's very close to what Lincoln was experiencing during the Civil War. Edgewood, did you want to share any of your objects?
My tongue.
Your tongue? Gosh, yeah, I guess that is kind of wet. Other thoughts from Edgewood?
A water bottle because there's water in it.
Yeah, there's people in the chat talking about water bottles too. Go ahead.
Hand sanitizer.
Hand sanitizer, Clorox wipes, amazing. Other thoughts? There's snow outside. That's a great answer as well. And maybe people have, a water bottle or something nearby that they're drinking. I have one more from Edgewood. Go ahead.
There's like a little bit of liquid left inside my Kona ice cup. I don't think you can see, but
yeah, I can't see it, but I can see the cup, and I think ice is a great, ice definitely gets wet over time if you just sort of leave it alone, right? Okay, that was very exciting. You all had some great problem-solving skills so far. We are going to keep rolling on Lincoln's commute home to the cottage. As he left the White House, he would ride northeast through the city, and he would pass Walt Whitman's house. Can you guys see how there's sort of a grid towards the bottom of the map, and then up at the top, it's a little bit fuzzier and there's like speckles and stuff? All that speckledy stuff represents trees and fields and countryside, and the grid represents the built up part of the city. So Lincoln would pass Walt Whitman's house on his way home. Walt Whitman is over there on the right-hand side, with the Santa Claus beard. He was a famous poet who had come to Washington, D.C. because he was looking for his brother. His brother had signed up to fight in the war, and then they didn't hear from him, and they didn't hear from him, and they didn't hear from him. So Whitman came to D.C. and he started volunteering in the hospitals where the soldiers were injured, because he was hoping he would find his brother, or maybe somebody who knew something about his brother. So that's what that picture is on the left-hand side. That's a picture of a hospital in Washington, D.C. during the Civil War. Take a look, see what you see that looks different from how hospitals look today. The big things I notice are these big mosquito nets over the soldiers' beds and the gas lamp here in the middle, because they were all working without electricity. Great question, Gus. He did end up finding out where his brother was, but his brother was not in the hospital. They finally got another letter from his brother. But Whitman met a lot of other soldiers that he talked to, got to know, became friends with over the course of his hospital volunteering. This is another image of a hospital in Washington, D.C. During the Civil War. This one is pretty close to the Cottage. I don't know if y'all can see this second American flag in the back. That's pretty tiny, but that's where the Cottage is located in this picture. So this hospital was much closer to the Cottage. The buildings with the black roofs are the constructed sort of stone brick buildings of the hospital. And the buildings over here with all these white roofs are temporary buildings, tents that were built to accommodate all the additional soldiers who were injured. If any of y'all have ever gone to a school that had trailers for classrooms, it's kind of like that, right? It was a temporary building because they had run out of space in the main building. The other person who was volunteering in the hospitals during the war was Mrs. Lincoln. That's her on the left-hand side with the flower crown. She was married to Abraham Lincoln, and she would go to the hospitals and she would help the soldiers write letters home to their parents. I think this is something that was important to her because she had a son who was of an age to be in the army, and she had also lost one of her sons before. So she knew what it was like to not know if your kid was going to be okay. And in writing these letters, she could help the parents figure out what was going on with their family members and really get everybody reconnected. The other place that Lincoln would encounter wounded soldiers on his commute is coming in ambulances up the same roads that he was traveling to the hospitals. So that picture on the right is a picture of Civil War ambulances. Again, looks pretty different from our situation today. This ambulance does not have closed sides or lights or sirens, but it was still helping people get to safety and get to the hospital care as best as they could. So inspired by all of that, I'm going to ask you for your next challenge coming up here. I want you to bring me something that you could use to help someone else. Go. Awesome. I see first aid kit coming in, some aloe vera. I see Edgewood has a bunch of options here. We're going to give everybody just like another couple seconds to look and discover what they need. Something you could use to help somebody else, really with anything. It doesn't have to be with an injury from the war. Yeah, good. Okay, so I want to hear what Edgewood's objects are, and I also want to hear from Gus more about how you would use a book to help somebody. So Edgewood, take it away. What you got?
You could use a pencil and like give it to them to help them like write and stuff.
Like if they're in the middle of their classwork and they really need a pencil. Great answer. Okay, what else?
A Band-Aid to help with injuries.
Yeah, we have a couple folks in the chat who've discovered some Band-Aids too. More stuff, Edgewood?
Book.
Yeah, you guys have books. I think Gus is saying that the book would help you with your quiz or your homework. Somebody in the chat has written your hands, which I think is a great answer as well, that lifting something for someone, opening a door for them, helping them carry something, helping them fix something that's broken. Those are all things you can do with your hand. I see more objects at Edgewood. Can you tell me about them?
I have a dictionary to help people find the right words.
Yeah, great. Okay, one more, Edgewood. Let me know what you got.
The time on my watch. They sometimes need to know the time.
Yeah, I myself do not wear a watch and would not know what time it was if I did not have all these computers around me. I also see some tissues in the chat, which is a great answer. And I also really liked Abby's answer from the chat about a blanket, which can be helpful both sort of physically and emotionally to someone. So that's incredible. Great set of answers. We're rolling forward on the commute. Lincoln would pass Walt Whitman's house, and as he was getting to the edge of the city, kind of this boundary between the fields and countryside on the top side of the map and the grid on the bottom side of the map, he would encounter a contraband camp. So contraband is a little bit of a complicated word. Can I just get a quick show of hands who has heard that word before? Yeah, okay. So contraband now usually means like something that you're not supposed to have, right? During the Civil War, it meant something way more specific. Contraband of war is stuff that one army has taken from the other army. They've said like, this is my stuff now. It's my guns, it's my food, it's my blankets maybe, and we're gonna keep it. This is contraband of war. It's mine now. However, contraband camps during the Civil War were not full of stuff. I mean, they did have some stuff, but they were full of people. So ammunition is another great example coming in from the chat. During the Civil War, these people were escaping slavery, and the excuse that the Union Army was giving for not having to send them back to the people who were enslaving them was to say, oh, actually, these are contraband of war. We're going to keep them. So when people say contrabands during the Civil War, what they mean is people. And the other thing that's important to remember is that, you know, ammunition or blankets or whatever cannot steal itself, but these people were almost always the ones escaping themselves, getting themselves away from slavery. And they were coming to Washington, D.C. because Washington, D.C. had already ended slavery in April of 1861, which is right at the beginning of the war. The D.C. Emancipation Act came out, and it said that slavery was illegal in Washington, D.C. Here in D.C., we're surrounded by Virginia and Maryland. They were both slaveholding states. So people who were enslaved in those places came to Washington, D.C. because they knew their freedom would be safer if they could get to DC. There's a picture on the left of some of those folks in a contraband camp in DC. And the one on the right is from a contraband camp that wasn't quite in the city, but was nearby. That one is something that's related to what Lincoln encountered when he rode by these contraband camps, because we have a story from someone who was living in one of those camps that Lincoln stopped and sang hymns with them. And she says he stood and sang and prayed just like all the rest of the people. Another image to give you an idea of what the conditions in contraband camps were like. We're seeing we were looking before at the fact that the roads weren't paved. You can see that these conditions are pretty varied here in these contraband camps. And that stands out to me in this image as well of people moving to a contraband camp. You can see that they have 3 different animals that are helping pull their wagon, and they're all totally mismatched. So people just did whatever they needed to do to get themselves and their families to safety. And in honor of them and their encounter with Lincoln, I want you, for your next challenge, which is coming up right here, I want you to bring me something that makes noise. Go ahead. Oh yeah, a kazoo is a great option. I know that people can make noise. Do you have any objects that can make noise?
My mouth.
Okay. A bugle is coming in from Abby. Great. Other thoughts, Edgewood?
My hands.
Can you give me an example
Give her an example.
of your hands making noise?
Clapping.
Yeah. Clapping. You can make noise like this with your hands too. A record player is coming through. There's a guitar. That's awesome. Edgewood, go ahead.
A pencil sharpener.
Oh yeah, that can be pretty loud. Keep going.
This box.
Like a box full of pencils. Can you shake that for us so we can hear the noise, please? Amazing. I also like Ollie's answer of a clicky pen. You can make it noise that way. Okay, Edgewood, one more you have?
I also did a marker because like when you write, sometimes it makes like that squeaky sound.
It makes like a sound when you write with it. Yeah, great answer. I'm curious about what noises your sloth keychain makes. My friend in the chat who's coming through here. Great options. All of these make noise. And it was really fun for me to watch you guys make noise in real life to show off what you have discovered. So continuing past the contraband camp, Lincoln would ride up what's called the 7th Street Turnpike. It's now called Georgia Avenue, but that's why we talk about the 7th Street Challenge, because that's the road that Lincoln was riding on when he was going home. He would arrive up at the top of the hill at this yellow house symbol, and he would arrive at the cottage itself. You can see it's outside of the developed part of the city. It's in the countryside. And this is what it looked like in the 1860s. This picture is actually from Mrs. Lincoln's photo album or like her family photo book that she kept of the cottage. And this is what it looks like today. So we worked really hard to make it look like it did in Lincoln's time. But we only have pictures from Lincoln's time of the outside of the house. And so when we go in the inside of the house, we have to work with a different set of information, with written information, all that kind of stuff. I see that somebody from FCMA wants to share their answer, but you're labeled as FBI in the chat, so it was a little hard to tell who you were. Sorry about that. I'll make sure that you get a chance to share your answer in a moment. So inside the cottage, again, Lincoln and his family lived here for 3 summers. He was commuting back and forth. This is a picture of his bedroom in the cottage. That's our copy of his desk. The original desk is in the White House now. It is not here at the cottage. And Lincoln would pace back and forth in this bedroom. One time a student asked me, how could Lincoln sleep if slavery was happening? And we know the answer, actually. He often couldn't, and he would pace back and forth while he was working on his ideas. The cottage really gave him sort of this peace and quiet, this escape from the busyness of the White House and the smell downtown. It gave him a place to think about all the complicated things that he needed to think about. Where do you all go when you have something complicated to think about? Is there a place that works really well for you? Yeah, Gus is saying their room. That maybe gets you some privacy, which is something Lincoln and his family were looking for. They were also looking for some privacy because their son Willie had died in the White House earlier, just before they moved here, and so they wanted to get away from there for that reason as well. Maybe going home makes you feel safe and a good place to think. Does anybody like to think while they're like sort of walking around or anything? I see Edgewood has an answer. Go ahead.
I go to my like loft area and play video games.
Okay, you take your mind off of it. Okay, go ahead.
I go to my couch.
Tell me more about your couch. Why is it a good place for thinking?
Because it's comfy and I can like watch movies.
Yeah, being physically comfortable is helpful when you're trying to think about something complicated. Go ahead, Edgewood.
I go to my dog.
Your dog, why is that helpful?
Because it's cute.
Why does your dog help you think?
Because it's like comforting.
Yeah, right? And sometimes I know somebody who, when she is working on a story, she first tells the story to the dog just to like practice telling it to somebody who's gonna, think the story is great no matter what. Yeah, I see somebody, Delvin also has pets that are comforting and good for thinking. So Lincoln was looking for a place to do all of that because while he was up here, he was working on this big problem. What do we do about slavery? So your next challenge here, as we are thinking about Lincoln and what makes a good place for thinking, good place to make your ideas the best version of themselves, I want you to bring me something that helps you focus. Go. Something that makes you feel like you're really in the zone. You're going to do your best thinking right now. Something that helps you do what you need to do. Something that helps you be like really get into a project maybe. Okay. I'm seeing some tea can help you focus. I like that answer. Maybe something again to center yourself. Maybe I've seen people who feel focused when they're doing something with their hands. That's something that's sometimes true for me, that I have better thoughts when my hands are busy. Edgewood, did you have things you wanted to share as well? Go ahead.
I brought my brain because it helps me focus.
Can you say that again?
I brought my brain because I don't really think I could focus at all.
Without it, yeah. Is there anything your brain needs help with when it's trying to focus?
Not really.
Okay, you're very lucky in that regard. All right, Edgewood, what else do you have?
I have a pencil because I feel more focused when I'm writing stuff.
Yeah, a bunch of people in the chat have pencils as well. It makes you feel sort of ready and equipped to focus. We have some comfort objects like a book or a squishmallow maybe. Awesome. For me, it's interesting to think about the inside of your head is where all your ideas are, right? But how does the stuff that is outside you affect those things, and how can you make it work better for yourself is something I think is really interesting to think about. While Lincoln was living here at the cottage, he was working on ending slavery. We're going to back up just for a second to this picture of his bedroom and talk about the idea that he came up with to work on ending slavery here at the cottage. That's called the Emancipation Proclamation. I know many of you may have heard of it before. Emancipation means making people free, and proclamation means telling everybody about it. So Lincoln paced the floor here at the cottage. He was wearing his slippers in the middle of the night, and he came up with this idea where he would offer the Confederate States, the states that had left to start their own country, he would say, hey, you have 100 days. If you come back inside those 100 days, you can keep all the people you've enslaved. Everything will be the same as it was before. If you don't come back, the enslaved people will become free. Then he waited 100 days and nobody took him up on the offer. So on the 1st of January, 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation took effect, and over 4 million people became free in states that were controlled by the Confederacy. It left out, though, the states that were controlled by Abraham Lincoln's side of the war. So for example, Maryland, which is very close to us here in DC, stayed a Union state. And so the people who were enslaved in Maryland stayed enslaved after the proclamation. So Lincoln had to keep working on that idea. He had taken some steps forward, but he had not completely solved the problem. Looking out of these windows from his bedroom, Lincoln would be able to see a vista of the Capitol building, which is, I've circled for you there on the map. It's still downtown, of course, it's still in use as part of the government. And like we looked at before, the Capitol building was not completed at the beginning of the Civil War. It wasn't finished being constructed. You can see the dome is missing here in this picture from 1860. That was true of a lot of buildings here in downtown Washington, DC. This is another picture of what the Washington Monument looked like. You can see it sort of cut off at the top. That's about 1/3 of the way of its final height. And you can see these, they were using the area around the Washington Monument to organize soldiers and also supplies for the soldiers. But over the course of the war, the Capitol was a continuing project. It was something people were still working on. And it's something Lincoln thought was important to continue working on, because he knew that the Capitol was a symbol of the government, and he wanted people to understand that the government was going to continue even during these very, very difficult and complicated circumstances of the war. Like the Capitol was unfinished, and also the country was unfinished a little bit, right? So in honor of all these bits and pieces of Washington, DC that we've been looking at, I would like you, for your next and final challenge, to bring me something that you can break into fractions. Go ahead. This should not be something like a glass vase that you can break and not put back together. It should be something that you can break into fractions, that comes in multiple pieces. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to look for something that is one thing made up of other things. Oh yeah. Ollie, can you describe the different pieces of your wool roving in a little more detail? I love Abby's answer of pizza. Pizza comes in slices, but it's all one pizza. It's all pizza in the end. Edgewood, do you have things you wanted to share?
A pencil, you could break
Okay, tell me more about that.
you could break it in half and it would like go into fractions.
You could sharpen both bits and then you would have 2 pencils, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, go ahead, Edgewood.
You can break paper into fractions.
I'm seeing some more food coming in from Mount Pleasant in a sub sandwich. And I also see some folks who have like sets that are built to come in pieces, like Legos or a molecule set or a fraction set for math. Edgewood, I see you have one more answer there.
You could split a book into fractions.
Do you mean like the pages or like the story?
Like you could split them into like each chapter is a different fraction of it.
Right. You could say like, I'm actually tearing the pages apart, or you could say this chapter is a piece of the story and the whole thing together is the story. That's awesome. Great answers so far, y'all. So the next thing I want to know about from you all is related to what Lincoln was doing. He was working on solving a big problem in his community, which was this challenge of what do we do about slavery? How do we be a country that's about freedom, that believes that freedom is important, and also deal with this issue of people being enslaved? So I'm going to give you a little bit to think about it, and then I'd love to hear your answer. What is a big problem in the world that you care about? Who do you see in your community that needs help, or what's a problem that you want to work on solving? Think about it for a moment, and then I'll check back with you to hear what you have to say. What's a problem that you care about? Sometimes I start with like a group of people that I want to help, or maybe a group of animals. Yeah, Delvin is talking about wolves needing help for conservation. heard of sort of, turtles or whales or etc.? What's a problem that you care about? Okay, Edgewood, I see one answer coming through. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Like animal testing while making products and stuff.
Oh, keeping the animals safe during cosmetic testing. Amazing. Elisa has put people who don't have enough food. That's a great answer for a problem. Go ahead, Edgewood.
COVID is a big issue.
Say it again.
COVID.
Oh, COVID. Yeah, big problem. Very complicated, I would say. Yes. Mount Pleasant is writing about infrastructure and the condition of their streets in their city. Go ahead, Edgewood.
Oh, pollution problems.
Pollution. Yep. We've got pollution coming into the chat too. Great answer. Go ahead.
We need to do more research on cancer.
Cancer. Yeah. A big complicated problem because every kind of cancer works differently. Go ahead, Edgewood.
We need to stop hunting animals.
Okay. One last thing. Go ahead.
We could try to help Turkey with their helping rebuild because of the really bad earthquake that they had.
Yeah, after a natural disaster in all the different places that those happen, that's a big complicated problem to solve as well, and something that's really important. I like Creek House's answer of mosquitoes and diseases as well. What can we do about helping the disease, or what can we do about there being fewer mosquitoes? How can we stop the mosquitoes from spreading the disease? So I want you to put all the stuff that you found in front of you on your desk or your table or your couch or wherever you're at. I want you to put it in front of you in the order that you brought it back. You all have been using your problem solving skills this whole time to solve the challenges that I was presenting you with. And Lincoln on his commute was kind of a model for working on how to solve problems. So you can use his journey as an example. When a big, messy, wet problem shows up in your life, you can do something to help. You can use your voice to make some noise. You can do what you need to do to get yourself and the people around you focused and bring all the pieces of your community together. So I'm really excited to see how you all apply your problem solving skills, which we already know are excellent because you have brought all of these incredible examples to me. I'm really excited to see you apply those problem solving skills to all these problems that you mentioned that you care about, because all of these big complicated problems are problems that we are, not something you can do by yourself. Ending slavery is not something that Lincoln was doing by himself. He was just a big piece of the puzzle because he was the president. But all of those people who were escaping slavery themselves and saying, I would like to be free, I'm moving to Washington, D.C., those people were making slavery end as well. So even if you're not the president, which I don't think I saw the president in here anywhere, I'm not the president, as you probably noticed. You can still do something about problems that you care about. Thank you very much for bringing all of these exciting things to me and listening to what I have to say. I have a little bit more time before we finish up if people have other questions about the cottage or about Lincoln that I can try and answer for you. If you would like to learn more about the cottage itself, I'm going to put our website in the chat. It is lincolncottage.org. Again, we are a museum in DC. We have a bunch of cool stuff online. We got a podcast, we got a YouTube channel, but you can also come visit us in person and see the house that Lincoln lived in. You can walk through the spaces that he walked through. Then the cottage was built in 1842. So I'm going to let you do the math about how many years ago that is. But it was built in 1842, 170 something. Emily wants to know what Lincoln's bed looked like. That's a great question. We don't really know. We don't have a picture of it. We don't have a drawing of it. We don't have a description of it. We do have, we have a list of the things that were in the White House when the family left the White House, and there's definitely beds on it, but we don't know really much about them at all. So great question. And that's one of the things we do on purpose here at the cottage, is rather than making a lot of guesses about the bed, we just didn't put a bed in the bedroom because we don't know what it looks like. What we talk about then in the bedroom instead is the ideas that Lincoln was working on in his bedroom. So, great questions. Delvin wants to know, did the Lincolns have a farm? Not really here at the cottage. Abraham Lincoln absolutely grew up on a farm. So he worked on a farm until he was about 20, 21 years old. So he had a lot of experience with it, but it wasn't something he wanted to do for the rest of his life. He really was interested in doing things that were not farming, like being a lawyer or being the president. Edgewood, do y'all have any questions about Lincoln or the cottage that you want to get answered? Amazing. Okay. Well, in the absence of any further questions, thanks again, everybody, for participating today. I really enjoyed working with you all.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone who participated, and thank you, Joan, for all of your knowledge and your time. Great, awesome presentation. And thank you so much again to everyone who participated in the chat or on camera. Super, super cool to see everyone participate. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day.